same page about the rest of the semester, tests, exams. Uh, all this stuff should be on the syllabus, but I just want to remind you. So we are on the 18th. This is Thanksgiving break, right? So we're going to finish the shoulder muscles today. We'll do some practice, we'll do some examples, but in terms of the completion of the muscles you're accountable for today, scapula will start Wednesday, Friday. So we have scapula, scapula, and then we have two lectures that are almost kind of like review that we can do. We could do practice. I could answer questions. We could try to make sure. Remember, there's no. It's like the weekends are undefeated, as I say. And when people ask me about fundraising stuff, and they're like, "Well, what's the best weekend?" I was like, hey, "There's no good weekend between sports and activities and weddings. There's right." So my options to give you your last test. There's no perfect because I can't give you a test. Um, I cannot give you a test on the 4th or the 6th because that's like dead periods. And I didn't want to give you a test before the Thanksgiving break because a bunch of you won't be here because it's Thanksgiving break. So the only option I really had was that Monday, okay? So is it perfect? No, but it's the best option that I thought I had, all things considered. So going into this, that's why I kind of just wanted to talk about it. We have the shoulder, scapula, scapula, review, review, break, test. Now remember, this is the first time I've ever done this, but if you are comfortable with your grade after 3 tests, say along. If you want to take the cumulative final, that's going to be on Thursday, December 12th. And if you take the final, well, now you have 4 tests, and each test will be 25%. Make sense? Okay. Also remember, I feel like I'm in an infomercial, but wait, there's more. Your threshold for a C is 65%. Like I'm trying. So again, like after 3 tests, if you have a 66, go spend that time on other things you got to do. Okay. Any questions or clarifications?
The makeup exam comes long before.
Yes, yes. So if you have makeup exams, let me just make sure. Um, let's see. Yep. And again, is it perfect? No, but no one has class at 6 a.m. And even if you have work, you can make arrangements. 6 a.m. at Bourgeois open. We don't have to deal with traffic. So just one day that I can, because with my dyslexia, I got to do this one time. Okay. So yep, that's where the makeup's on. All right, we're good. All right, let's get to our final muscles, and so my favorite muscle, latissimus dorsi and teres major. They are sister muscles at the shoulder. I'm going to start with the latissimus dorsi because it's just so cool. The coverage area on this muscle is absolutely insane. It is a muscle that has, let's see if I could, look at that coverage area, guys. So it has a pelvic origin, lumbar and thoracic. To get to your shoulder, it crosses the scapula. So here's a muscle that has function at trunk. I didn't hold you accountable for it because it's kind of weird, but it has trunk function, it has scapula function, and primarily you just hear about the shoulder function. But this is think of it like this. We do a lot of transitioning between upper and lower, or I guess from proximal to distal, lower to upper. So having a muscle that crosses into both and has the proprioception and the feedback and the transitioning, that this is it's a pretty cool muscle. Uh, one medical doctor I heard speak at a conference said this is probably the most important muscle to sport and function, just for no other reason its coverage area. There's no other muscle that has that kind of crossing. So let's just do this. I'm hoping we can apply this by now. I'm not asking you for this on the test, and if I know what you're like, well then don't ask. I get it. I just have to. Knowing what we know about how muscles cross, would this left lat be a left lateral or a right lateral trunk pull? Just think about how it would pull. Would it be a left or a right transverse trunk rotation puller? Just think of how it pulls. See how it has an angle? It's almost kind of like the back version of a right external oblique. You see that? So the left would pull to the left. In fact, that's why like when you stretch and you twist your trunk, your shoulder and your trunk kind of work together. If you think about it, like it's kind of natural because that lat is pulling from way back over here. This might be the shyest class I've ever had in the history of Jesus. That's okay. That's okay. All right, you talkers. Remember how I said the three little slits, lady between two majors? So there's the lady, latissimus dorsi insertion, teres major, and the big pectoralis major. This picture is really cool because what it does is it shows you how, remember the subscapularis came from posterior to anterior and it crossed in front, so that's why it's an internal rotation puller. Latissimus dorsi is very similar. So it's coming from the back, but it crosses here, so it's an internal rotation puller as well. And what I love about that picture in the PowerPoint is it's almost like they allow you to see through the humerus so that you could see how it's pulling in the front. Does that make sense? And remember, I said we have a lot of big, powerful internal rotators. Like you have pec and lat working as internal rotators. Because to speed up, to make your hand go fast, you have to have some big, powerful engine muscle. All right, so this is a view, an anterior view. Once again, three-dimensional concepts are hard to see in two-dimensional pictures. So what we have to remember is that meaty part of that muscle is further back than the humerus. So it's coming from posterior to anterior. And that's what's giving it that internal rotation pull, as well as that extension pull, as well as that adduction pull. I think the adduction pull is pretty easy to see on this one. This two-dimensional picture, it's harder to see that it's trying to pull the humerus to the back. So we need like more of a lateral view to see the extension pull. Such a cool picture. All right, let's look at some PowerPoints. Does that make sense how it disappears to the front? Just trying to spin it. In fact, what I like about it is when the internal rotations happen, you can actually see the front of it. Wrap it around. Functional circles, latissimus dorsi, posterior crossing extension pull, medial crossing adductor pull, internal rotation spinner pull, medial or internal rotation. So again, look at all these internal rotators, the anterior fibers of the anterior deltoid fibers, the anterior fibers of the deltoid, subscat, posterior fibers, pectoralis major, clavicular, and sternal fibers for internal rotators, latissimus dorsi internal rotators, teres major, I'm about to get into subscat. Some big, powerful internal rotation pullers to help me to throw things, be able to cause damage at a distance. So one of the things, if you were see how I want to put it. You know how in nature that like predators look for elderly, weak, hurt animals to go at first, right? Culling the herd. Because there's a risk when you hunt in nature that you could get stepped on, you could get gore, like there's a risk to get hurt. So it makes sense that they're like, well, that's a young one or that's an old one, there's less chance of getting hurt. We as humans, when we develop the ability to throw things, we were able to do damage at a distance. I didn't have to get in close where you could potentially claw me, step on me, hurt me. So, you know, that's kind of how these things kind of evolve, that we can do damage from a distance, make the hand go fast, to throw things or to. Would it act as a side of truck support for the posture? Yeah, it's the latissimus dorsi is a trunk extensor, where the right is a trunk extension puller, right lateral, right transverse. The left is an extensor, left lateral, left transverse. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't have, I will add to that though, that it's not as fatigue resistant as your erector spinae. So it's not like you need your lats to maintain posture, but in terms of sport and activity and function, like that's when the lat can shine, because it can produce very powerful twisting, bending things. And think about a swimmer being able to have a muscle that goes from pelvis all the way to shoulder, literally connecting lower to upper, is incredible. Incredible. All right, let's get to this last one. So there's your latissimus dorsi. Have a lot of different views of it, because I let it sivich. So let's get to the teres major. So here's a good view of our teres major. The teres major starts on the scapula. So remember our reference, we have the spine right here. We have a muscle on top of it, superior, supraspinatus right on the bottom, infra, inferior, infraspinatus, teres minor, and then teres major. Now the teres minor, as hopefully you guys have been studying, crossed laterally, so it's an external rotation puller. The teres major starts a little bit below it, but actually goes into the front. That's why it's an internal rotation. So lady between two majors, lady, this is pectoralis major, this is teres major. Internal rotation pull. All right, let's get into some common mistakes with verbiage. teres major. Don't confuse it for pectoralis major. They both have majors in the name. teres major, don't get it confused for teres minor. You know, so just sometimes just things sound similar. Almost like for the lower extremity when I said quadratus femoris, rectus femoris, quadricep, there's just sometimes there's terms that's why we got to study, to make sure we don't flip a major and a minor. Um, Good. So again, sister muscle, meaning that it has the same functions at a particular joint. It doesn't mean the muscle has to have the same function everywhere. So obviously the teres major doesn't get anywhere close to the pelvis and doesn't have near the coverage area. But in terms of crossing the shoulder, it crosses the shoulder the exact same way as the lat. Make sense? So between your lists, between your circles, if you're cross-sectional, if you took another class and learned all this stuff, awesome. I just want right answers. What's the function of latissimus dorsi? Adduction forwards, extension forwards, internal rotation forward. How would I stretch it? Well, it's extensor, I need flex, it's an adductor, I need abduct. But remember, getting your hand above your head is the same point whether you take the sagittal road or you take the frontal road. So that's why, like, it doesn't really matter here or there. You're going to get to the same place. It's an internal rotation puller, so I need to externally rotate. Very nice. What does the supraspinatus do? It's an abduction puller. It's an abductor. So we've done this enough times where you could kind of know that functions are just how they pull. Seeing the cross section is a visual representation of how they pull in anatomical. I prefer the cross section only because sometimes pictures don't give us three-dimensional views of everything. So I'll give you an example. Do we really know? So see this one right there is your teres major. Like it's hard to tell how that crosses. There's the teres major right there. Can we tell how that crosses the shoulder? Not with all the other meat in the way, right? So that's why we do them individually. But the so what of how it crosses is the most important thing, or is the thing for function. So let me make sure I covered all my bases. Biceps brachii, short head, shoulder flexor, coracobrachialis, shoulder flexor, biceps brachii, long head, flexor, abductor, is that anterolateral cross. The deltoid is how many muscles? One muscle made up of three sections, right? Three areas. It's a fan shape. So the anterior deltoid, it's like saying Acadiana is an area of Louisiana. The anterior portion. South Lafayette, North Lafayette. So it's an area of one thing. So the deltoid does one thing. All the fibers are abduction pulls, and then certain parts have separate pulls. Anterior, flexor, internal, posterior, extensor, lateral, external. Supra is an abductor inside the circle of the circle, right? Those are just spinners, just like we did for the hip. They just play PE. Subscapularis, internal rotator, infraspinatus teres minor, lateral, external rotators. latissimus dorsi, teres major, we did that today, extensors, adductors, internal rotators. Pectoralis major, once again, one fan-shaped muscle that has different sections. The pectoralis major, I guess, is more similar to the gluteus medius and minimus, where there's an anterior and middle. So here we have a upper clavicular and a middle. There is triceps brachii long head. We went over that last class as an introduction. So it looks like a big class, but it's really not. I don't think it's that bad. I think the hip is more tougher to visualize, but it's just me. Any questions? What do y'all want to do? Okay, of what? Like of houses? Flowers? So this is what I mean by that question. We've now done this enough where like I literally mean what y'all want to do. And so I had pictures of what?
Can you do it where you're what's the antagonist and all that?
Sure,
Those
sure, sure. Give me a exercise, something simple, something that's not too complex. Just think about being in the weight room and doing something for the shoulder. Bench press, okay. Let's try to find a good view of it. All right, guys, so make a note of this. I'm glad you brought up bench press. So all of our circles are from anatomical position. So obviously in the bench press, you're not in anatomical position. So we didn't do it for the hip, but we'll do it for the chest. So the main horizontal adductor, so the ones that you literally think are crossing and pulling in a direction, will cross. So your pectoralis major, your anterior portion, your deltoid, obviously your coraco, your bicep, that kind of stuff too. What's really neat also is that your rotator cuff, remember I was talking about switching function? So like here, your subscap would be like an internal rotation puller, but if you abduct, well now that subscap is actually right here. So it's still kind of doing its job, keeping the golf ball in the golf tee, but now it actually has a horizontal adduction pull. For the test, if we do horizontal stuff, I would just ask you to know pectoralis major and anterior deltoid. All right. So that's why I wanted to say that because we didn't chat about it, and the exercise y'all wanted to do was the horizontal. So we're looking at either pecs and anterior or lats and posterior. And I don't think you want to pull the bar to your chest, right? So we'd be working horizontal adductors. The reason I keep it seems to be working in 310. The reason I keep going back to group based off of pull is because isn't it nice to have muscles named the supinator or the adductor longus or the adductor brevis or the pronator teres? That's great. It tells me it's pull. But when you have muscles like the sternocleidomastoid or the soleus, right? And so I always like to bring it back to group because at least group has pull in the name. Okay. So I could do, well, you're working pec, duh. But I don't like to assume. I like to say, well, what's that exercise trying to do to my shoulders, trying to horizontally abduct me? So I don't need muscles that are also trying to horizontally abduct me. That'd be a bad day. I need muscles that are trying to horizontally adduct me. I need horizontal adductors. Pec is like, hey, I could do that. And also by identifying the group based off of pull, it helps me to better see concentric and eccentric. because positive work is going to be when the motion happens in the direction of the muscle's pull. So doing it based off of pull helps me to make these sentences like horizontal adductors are going to do horizontal adduction through positive work, through concentric. Horizontal adductors are going to do horizontal abduction through negative work or eccentric. It helps me to make those common sense statements without saying the pectoralis major is going to do horizontal adduction through concentric. Does that make sense? By seeing the pull, it really helps to prove the contraction types. And over almost 20 years of teaching, that's where I see most of my students having trouble with. I know you know the definition of concentric and eccentric, but do we know how to see it or apply it, or that's what we're working towards. So that's why I keep coming back to direction of pull, because once we have the direction of pull, then we can match up motion with negative and positive work. Okay. So the eccentric phase would be, in this case, lowering the bar down. But by lowering the bar down, we're going to observe horizontal abduction. Horizontal adductors do horizontal abduction through eccentrics. Coming back up, horizontal adductors do horizontal adduction through concentrics. Who are those muscles? The only two I would hold you accountable for outside of anatomical position in this case would be pecs and anterior delta. The obvious. How about this? Let's do a little spin on this conversation. Guys, have I ever told you how to exercise? No. I'd be the last person to tell you how. My job is just to tell you how things work. Explain in hopefully layman's terms some of the physics involved. But I'm never going to say this is what you should or shouldn't do. But let's have a physics conversation about the arc back. So, y'all know what I'm talking about? People that arc their back. Y'all know what a decline press is? And you know how on a decline press, again, speaking layman's terms, but you feel pretty strong. You feel stronger in kind of a decline press. And so what people that arc their back are doing is they're creating a decline. Now, why does the decline feel stronger? Well, let's think of it motion-wise. Globally, you're still doing the same motion of the humerus, but because you arc your back now from a relative point of your shoulder, you're actually going horizontal and you're going down. Does that make sense? So you have an adduction component. Guess what big, powerful muscle is an adduction puller? Latissimus dorsi. So now you got pec and lat being like, man, I love working with you. So if you just did horizontal, the lat's like, you're not creating an external force that I can play tug of war against. But as soon as you go decline, or in this case, create a decline, and you have an adduction component, dude, the lat is just like, that's why you feel stronger. It's not about like lower fibers. It's really based off of how it crosses. There really is no lower fibers, but the lat is like, this is where I park my car. Make sense? It's kind of pec and lat. It's a powerful combination. Let's do some of this. So I didn't want to give away the keywords, so I kind of want it to be a surprise when I try to find an exercise to do, so that's why it's. We might have did this from last class, but I know some of you haven't gotten to watch the videos yet, because it's not Thanksgiving. You know I'm telling the truth. It's okay. It's okay. You know how I know? Because I can see the views. I check the views on the videos. I'm like, this video has 4 views. And then like the week it says this video has like 80 views. I was the same way in college. Judge it. Yoink, yoink, yoink. See if that comes up. We do not assume, we try not to. So if I say, what I mean by that is we can't assume that the first movements are always concentric. Sometimes, but sometimes not. You're doing a squat, you take them far off the rack, your first movement's gonna be the eccentric, right? So we don't assume. So if I told you from left to right, what I'd love for you to do right now, I'll give you a couple of minutes, identify your agonistic group. What muscle group do I need in a specific direction of pull because the exercise is trying to move me another way? Once you identify your agonistic group based off of pull, well, now it's just who pulls it. It's who are the muscles that pull that way. Then all you got to do is say, well, I know the muscles that I'm working pull this way because I can see why. Now it's just matching up positive and negative work. So if I have muscles that are pulling this way and I see that movement, it's got to be concentrics. And if I have muscles that are pulling that way and I see the other movement, it's got to be concentric. So try to do all of that in the next couple of minutes, then we'll talk about it. And also, I want to preview, the reason I put y'all on the spot is because I feel I need to put you in better positions to learn how to study on your own. Not that you don't, but sometimes I'll get feedback. I just don't know how to practice. I don't know how to study. And it's like, just pull stuff up on Google. Like just ask, and even if you don't know a specific exercise, just search elbow exercises, radial on the joint exercises, wrist exercises, shoulder exercises. So, it was also to try to stimulate you guys being able to come up with ways to practice. Feel free to check your answer with a neighbor. Because to me, that's also a great way to study or practice. Because if you get the same thing, awesome. And if you don't, awesome. Because if you don't get the same thing, that's a way to have a conversation to figure out why. again, not to sound like a broken record, but you can see how, what my intent of this class is, like anatomy, origin, insertion, innervation, that's all great, but that's all geography. It's all just memorization. Can you do something with those things? You memorize the rule book. I really love this now. If you memorize the rule book of basketball, you know every rule in the book. You know the distance, the court, the rules, but can you play? I studied everything there is to know about softball. Can I hit? Can I throw? So that's what we're trying to do here is the easiest question to answer with your access of knowledge is the origin of the latissimus dorsi. Ooh, there it is. But what's not as easy to look up to is that how do you search that? How do you look at that? How do you play? How do you Google how to play? It's more important to me is for you guys to learn how to play. Learn how to play kinesiology. All right, external force in this exercise is trying to do what to the shoulders? Flex, absolutely. All right, and remember guys, this is not shoulder extension. Remember that from 310, ESPN has been lying to you. ESPN, fake news. This is shoulder flexion. Do you remember why they would say that? Because I think they were saying the elbow. Like the elbow is fully extended, but my elbow was extended when I was standing in the outfield. So it wasn't like I was in the outfield like this. Okay? Flexion of the shoulder. Guys, if we don't know that this is flexion of the shoulder, none of this muscle stuff is going to matter because you're going to get the first part wrong, and so it doesn't matter. That's why the basic motions are so important because you don't even give yourself a chance if we don't know that this is flexion. What's the key term with flexion? Flexions get you into fetal. Yeah. Machine's trying to flex you. The last thing you need are flexion pullers. Throw the bar up, right? The machine's trying to flex you, you need extension pullers. Right away, that should tell you something. Who are the extension pullers? Right? Latissimus dorsi is a big extension puller. If I say lat, I got to say teres major, sister muscles, posterior fibers of the deltoid. Okay, so again, beating the dead horse, metaphorically speaking, I love animals. But if all we did was say lat, then we, through the process of Coco, remember you died 2 deaths? If we never recognize those other muscles, they vanish to history. The lat is very important, but the lat has help. And not only that, but what if you don't have a lat problem? What if you have a teres major problem? Well, I've never heard that muscle before. In 310, bless their hearts. I really like that class. They're really fun. Not that you guys aren't fun. Y'all are seniors. I get it. I was there. In 310, I said, y'all name muscles. We would go and get into the last unit and it was muscle stuff. And I was like, give me some muscles. Anything. And you have 500 something choices. And you know what I got? Bicep. And I got hamstrings. So the point is that we get, and there's nothing wrong with the glutes and the quads and the hams and the cores, but we have to know that there's a lot more different muscles in the body than our pecs and our quads and our hams and our glutes and our core. Okay. So we need extension pullers for this exercise. The exercise is trying to flex me the whole time. So I need muscles that are trying to extend me the whole time. okay? Now that I've established I need extension pullers, well, now I just got to work out the motion I observe, and that's going to show me the work. It's going to show me the contraction. If I'm working extension pullers, when I see extension, that's got to be concentric, and when I see flexion, that's got to be eccentric. Does that make sense? But it had nothing to do solely on the motion. It was the motion with the agonist. That's what told me. That's what solved the problem of contraction. I have to have two of the three variables. A plus B is equal to C. If you just give me A, I don't have enough context. If you just give me B, I don't have enough context. But if I have A and B, the extensors do extension, then C is solved. Has to be. It's an is. Does that make sense? So here from left to right would be the eccentric. Extensors doing flexion, and from right to left would be the concentric. Extensors doing extension. Cool? And if I just held the position on the left, I'd probably just ask the left because it's more obvious. That would be isometric, right? Muscles doing a job, preventing the arms from coming. Symmetric. One more. I want y'all to get your mics. Man, this girl's popular. Would we be working because we understand why we need to be working them? The machine's trying to do what? Therefore, I need what type of pullers? Who are those pullers? I don't want you, now look, if you're a savant, that's awesome, I just want right answers. But I've been tricked enough times to know that before I go right into muscles, I need to make sure that I'm using the ones that I think I'm using. And to me, once you establish your agonist, because you can see the why, everything else falls into place. Everything else is super easy. It's like climbing up the stairs of a big slide or water slide. Climbing up's the hard part, but going down is the fun, easy part. So identifying that is really the hardest part. Who are you working because you see why you need to work them? Everything else should be smooth sailing. Because who are those muscles? You either know how they pull, or you learn to list, or you see the circle. But the circles don't tell you who's working. Circles just tell you how they pull. Once you've identified how they pull, then you could use the circles as a reference to see, oh, I need laterals, I need medials, I need anteriors, I need posteriors, I need medial forwards, lateral forward. Okay? All right, the machine is trying to do what to your shoulders? Adduction. Good. I don't need adduction pullers. You need abduction pullers. I need shoulder abductors. What about the scapula? We'll get to the scapula. We're having shoulder conversation. Who are the abductors? Those are the lateral crossing muscles, right? So we have our deltoid, we have our supraspinatus, and our biceps break out of one head as a lateral cross. And again, it's not to disrespect the deltoid. That's the most important puller. But again, even if Michael Jordan scores 55 points, if the Bulls scored 100, he wasn't the only person that put the ball in the basket. Make sense? Where's my eccentric phase? Is it from left to right or right to left? Very good. And what's cool is that by now it shouldn't be a guess. It's like, well, if I'm working abductors, the concentrics is going to be when I actually see abduction. And if I'm working abductors, the eccentric is going to when I see adduction. So absolutely, the adduction happens from right to left. And that's when I'm going to have the eccentric component. Right? Another thing to take note of. Guys, I didn't name these things. I would have named them all different. I would have called abduction George and adduction Billy Bob. Just the ab and ad just sound so close. They just sound so similar. So again, I don't want you to miss concepts because you flipped ab and ad. Any other questions for today? Good? Does everybody, and again, it's not that you have to agree. Does everybody see why I do the things I do or try to emphasize the things I do? Just trying to get us to play kinesiology. And the best way to learn how to play is play. Have a good one.